Welcome to Lunchtime BABLing. My name is Shay Brown. I'm the CEO of BABL AI, a company that audits algorithms for bias, ethical risk, and effective governance. I'm joined by Brian Ilg and Jeffrey Raker. Welcome, guys. We're back again. Jeffrey, I'm gonna throw it to you. What do we want to talk about today?
So we could talk about Pilates and us getting old like we were doing before we started recording. I feel like our audience is eager to hear about all of our health problems. That could be really fun.
Aching bones.
All the muscles. Why are beds so comfortable when you wake up these days? Just never want to get out. No, so first, I want to mention a couple of things going on at BABL. So there's a new course that just got released that I'm teaching, Introduction to the EU AI Act. It's free for a few weeks if you want to enroll. It's really good high-level stuff, introducing you to the law if you're new to it, if you're starting your compliance journey, if you're trying to sell into the EU, or you just want to be aware of the law. It's quite good. You can get a Credly badge for completing it. So we'll link that below if you want to enroll. And then a nice reminder as well, we now offer a subscription program to all of our courses. So if you want to get in there, you want to do our AI auditor certificate, you want to do our quality risk management for the EU certification. And then we have a bunch of new stuff coming out in the coming months, new webinars, new certifications, new courses. So that'd be a good way. It's half off for the month of March. So if you want to get in and get a good rate early on. But I want to jump into this topic. So this is a topic I've been wanting to talk about for months. Now, I know the algorithm would have preferred us to talk about this on November 9th, but I like the dust settling and we can kind of talk about this in, I think, a little clearer head, and that is AI's impact on elections and democracy. So there's a ton of content out there. Arizona recently published a new study from their Secretary of State's Artificial Intelligence and Election Security Advisory Committee, who published a report on AI's impact. So I was just reading that this week and I was reminded, I really want to talk about this. So I think we'll talk kind of broadly. I have some questions, some thoughts. I want to poke your guys' brain. We can look at certain regulations that are coming up. We can just look broadly at the impacts. But I'll just throw it into the universe and see, Brian, Shay, do either of you guys have any impulsive thoughts, anything that just immediately comes to mind? Because I have a few.
Yeah, I mean, I will say that I think this was a big topic of conversation at RightsCon, and because RightsCon is about human rights, democracy is a big thing. Online platforms are a big thing, and we're talking about AI and its effect, but the delivery mechanism is typically social media platforms, which is where a lot of people get their news now. And so I'll just say, to start off, like, this is a hot topic of conversation among the sort of civil society community. And internationally, there's a lot of worry about it. I think probably in the US, there's a bit of a divide about whether this is a problem or not. But internationally, for sure, people are worried about that because some countries have experienced this shift. And, I think America has experienced it now as well. So, yeah, this is pretty important for us to figure out and get right.
Let me ask you something, because I have a thought. So when you're talking to these people, obviously social media comes top of mind. And my first thought is, when most people think social media, they don't really think AI, but the algorithm is AI. It's trying to curate the best possible feed for you, right? And you get into these echo chambers and all of that stuff. But I'm curious broadly if you could describe what your thoughts are in terms of what social media actually is. Like, what does that mean? We talk about it broadly, but I think most people think Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, but I think it's a little broader than that.
Well, I mean, I think there's obviously the large platforms, right? And so all the ones you mentioned, and there are, more niche platforms. There are also things like Reddit and Quora and other places where people congregate online and can post their own content. I mean, from a broad perspective, it's a place where you can post your own content, and it's a place where you can see visible other people's content, right? And the way I think about it, and I want to hear like Brian, what Brian thinks and what you think, but this is like a window to the world. And in a lot of cases, we don't have any other window to the world. People don't typically watch television anymore. Nobody's really listening to the radio. And so it used to be radio was everybody's window to what's happening in the world. And then television was, which was very curated, right?
A lot of regulations.
A lot of regulations around the separation between, news had to be very impartial, and there was serious regulations around not being impartial. But now the internet is sort of opened up people to see the world. But there are these windows, and there's filter effects that happen. And the place where AI comes into it is that you can't see everything at once. It has to be prioritized. And so AI is used to basically give you a lens into the world. And because of hyper specialization and individualization, that it's allowed to be tailored to you. And the whole business model is that it's going to draw you in and get you to engage more with that content. And it's going to speak to you and what your ideologies are, what you like, and what the advertisers want you to like. And that's where the AI comes in. But in my mind, it's really just like any portal into the internet where you have curated content that and other people can post, and those other people are not necessarily your neighbors. They could be state actors, they could be advertisers and businesses as well.
Yeah. Sorry, but I just got to get this thought out, and then I'll throw it to you, Brian. The reason I asked that is I've noticed this trend really in the last year. It's been happening for a while, but really the last year, it's just gotten significantly more prevalent. And that is this trend of people getting off of social media. And it's almost always because of politics, which is why, it's relevant for this podcast. But the follow-up trend that I've noticed with this is every single person I've talked to who is like, I've deleted the apps, I've gotten off the platform, I'm minimizing my social media. Every single person I talk to fills that void with YouTube and YouTube Shorts in specific. And for me, I hear that and I'm like, that is literally the exact same thing. It's doing the same thing to your brain. It's the exact same content. It's the same creators. It's the same type of algorithm. It's curating for you. And when you're talking about this portal to the world, that resonates with me for sure. But I don't think most people think YouTube when they think social media, but in my eyes, it absolutely is. And it's just as powerful, if not more powerful, because people think it's not the same thing. I don't know. Brian, what are your thoughts?
I might be the zag to the everybody who's gotten off social media. So I'm on LinkedIn. You'll see me on LinkedIn with this when this drops. But outside of that, yeah, I have left social media for any sort of personal reasons. It's great. I don't watch the news either because honestly, it all just kind of gives me anxiety. Everything that you said, Shay, in terms of this curated narratives that are kind of unchecked and unprompted, and I really see those things playing out. I hear the same conversations from people, and it's a lot of regurgitation. And what I think is people, because they get the news, I mean, they just are repeating what they hear all day, every day. And I think that is, for me, one of the biggest concerns is, just lack of free thought anymore. And it's just like what do they call it, brain rot, where okay, I just sit and I watch. And I think YouTube, just to talk about that, when there's visual and audio and all those things that are together, like people learn that way. My kids see, I watch movies, it's a lot more impactful. So I would say that YouTube would have a lot more impact than just people typing. So the other thing I would say is, and I have no supporting evidence, we'll call it, for this, other than my own gut vibes, which are fine for me, with a full disclaimer. I think there's a lot of normalization of audiences happening on social media, where, you see content that performs well, it folds into a lot of other people's, worlds. So if you get something that's really, really viral, everybody sees it because there's some sort of normalization happening there. So um, you see a lot of like similar talk tracks and veins and content going out. And, if they're in a malicious, have any sort of malicious, content or intent behind them rather. And I think you get into these really like potentially toxic cycles, echo chambers, and that's, people say like I went down the rabbit hole, and like it's, you went down the rabbit hole that hundreds of thousands of not millions of other people have probably gone down with the same kind of initial thought. Like they're kind of drawing you into a content funnel. So I think that's probably not totally off base, but I have lots of random thoughts about this, but I'm not an active social media user, and I have really it's been really beneficial to my thought process and just happening through life. So
I'm
yeah.
I'm working my way towards you. It's hard, especially because now I live in another country and I have family that the best way they can connect is via social media. But you've hit a number of chords for me. So one is like this idea that, there's all of this content, other people see it. I think one of the fallacies that social media in particular does, and I'm going to bring this back to elections and democracy here in a second, but one of the gross unforeseen problems is everybody thinks they're more informed while being less informed. And I think it's just a byproduct of the algorithms, because with all of these social media platforms, it's the sound bites and the headlines that get the traffic. And just by its nature, there's no substance. There's very little, if any, context, and it's just hard to put something there. There's this message I heard recently that facts are expensive, information is free. And it's just this idea that if journalists, peer-reviewed research, all this stuff, it takes a lot of effort, a lot of time. It's got to be curated. There's a lot of people that go in to get really good information. And usually the truth is really boring, right? But a soundbite, a headline is very quick. It can get that viral reaction. But then also you can kind of misinform people. And I think one of the big fears with elections is just how quickly people can be misinformed and shifted. And you can look at any crisis in the world right now, and the amount of misinformation around those crises is staggering. And you just, people going into their little whatever echo chamber they're in, they're getting the information they want to see. And Shay, I'll throw this back to you, but what do you think all of this misinformation, the algorithm kind of pushing people in this certain type of echo chambers, but now you also have all of these AI tools, AI generation tools that can make it, something not real look very real, or you can alter things quite easily. What are your thoughts on that? And maybe bring it back to the people you talked at RightsCon, and what are their concerns? How, are there ways people can kind of be safe around the content they're consuming?
Yeah, I mean, I think, there's a real assault on objective reality. When you only get your information from social media or the internet.
And people also and everyone's at fault. I'm at fault of this. You don't want to be wrong, right? So that confirmation bias, I'm going to go Google my answer, right? It's okay to be wrong sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's so so some of the stuff that people talked about at RightsCon was about, trying to come up with alternative spaces for people. So it's like alternative platforms that people can get information. Like Blue Sky, I think is one of the X. Mastodon was another one of the X or Twitter alternatives. And I think and so the idea is maybe we have better options for people that are much more healthier, and people will go there. But I think the part of the problem is that you're fighting against biology, really, and the way that these platforms work is that they're feeding into fear, they feed into dopamine, they feed, it's just, and it's optimized. And we know Facebook was really the pioneer of this. All of the way things interact, it's just feeding you dopamine. it's really tough to.
Gamification of
Yeah,
information.
absolutely, the gamification. And so um, we're going to have to do something different. I don't know what the answer is, but it definitely starts with education, and like a probably early on in life. Like I think, for my own kids, we don't want them on social media, and they're still like the only ones of their friends that are not on social media. And part of, I guess, our thesis there, and we may be wrong, is that, they, while their brains are developing, let's give them the best chance they can to foster like a critical thinking mindset and like a slow thinking. And I'm on LinkedIn, and I actually post this quite a bit. Most of my posts now are about focus and about stop chasing more information, like think slower, think more carefully. And that's like a something that it's going to be a really hard thing to fight the algorithm here and to get people to do that, because as soon as they're pressed for time, and it's like I have the leisure, I'm in a, whatever the socioeconomic status, such that I have some leisure time to think like that. I don't have this massive pressure to pay bills, and I'm not working 3 jobs or whatever. I think the biggest threat comes from those people who are economically under pressure, or physically, like physical violence, so like in war zones or in certain parts of the world where they just literally don't have the luxury of taking time to train themselves to like filter information in a way, or they don't have resources to educate themselves about that. So I think
Or they don't
there
even
does have
know
to be
that what
some
they're seeing.
restructuring of this. We have to figure out a solution that's not just like you have an alternative and then everybody's going to flock to that alternative. That's probably not going to happen.
No. And everybody has all this pressure to do more, 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 more. And this is what's so counter to a lot of the claims that AI is going to be able to do all this cool stuff for us, right? But I think it's somehow, forcing people into like more work or more panic, rather than, you know, automating is by its like nature, like taking work off of somebody's plate manually from a before state to a future state. We're automating something, so there's less work to be done by a person. So you would hope that, maybe it is going to create free time for people. But I think the free time for people has shifted into, well, they don't have a job anymore. They have lots of free time, but they have now this new financial stress. And I think, you look at economic pressure going on people and like what's happening and volatility and the, I'll bring this back to politics real quick. The elimination of those kind of safety nets uh, increases the temperature of that financial insecurity, right? All the things that have been removed, here in the United States. I don't know. I'm not going to speculate because I'm not a politician, but that's how I've interpreted those moves. Is we got to keep pressure on people so they're not free thinking, so that they continue to stay in the machine, so to speak, and in that space. So I would, I'm critical of those things. Like I try to observe from that point of view with politics, but there's so many more elements than even just AI specifically going on with democracy and the threats towards it. But I do think that there's a ton of pressure on people right now to try to figure out what's going on, and I think AI really does add to that because it's you know the financial insecurity, the job security, the layoffs, all the news headlines, like it's stressful for people. And yeah, I it's not switching to social media platforms to fix this. AI is affecting just people's attention spans in every single direction, and it's really causing a lot of anxiety.
But also on top of that, I mean, as you have things like unemployment rises, that has impacts politically, right? And there's a reason people get politically motivated in one direction or another. And economics is one of the most powerful drivers of, political shift. And I mean, you can just look at the economic numbers. Any new technology that comes around overwhelmingly benefits early adapters and then the wealthy who can invest in it overwhelmingly. And so if you have, people, big economic disruptors, that's got huge implications down the road on how things are voted on and what things are prioritized. And then you have the fear of like disinformation and how educated are people. Like I think anybody, the elderly especially, are super vulnerable to misinformation, right? One fun fact, Shay, on something you were talking about, I'm like going on random tangents. I have like so many random thoughts on this. But Finland recently put in new education requirements for training their youth on trying to identify credible information and disinformation at a very young age, something like 9 or 10 years old, which I think is a great initiative. I'll be really curious to see 5-10 years down the road how successful it is, because especially with AI and its ability to just kind of make something not real look real. I play around with like Unreal Engine and stuff like that, and it's getting really sophisticated. It'll be interesting to see how these things go down the road.
Yeah. I mean, education is going to be, I mean, it starts even as adults. I think like like the large language models, that's a case in point, or it's a microcosm of this, is like they spit out stuff that sounds so credible. It sounds like such like, oh, that makes sense, right? And even those of us who work in the field, you do have to like catch yourself, be like, okay, let me think about this critically. Does this make sense? Can I follow up on it? Can I understand whether it's accurate or not? And it's so easy now to generate things that sound like official news reports and blast them on social media, and people are going to take it for the real thing. And I think education, getting that knee-jerk reaction to doubt and to like be skeptical. Like this is, I've told this story about my PhD advisor before in other places, so I won't go through the whole thing. But a lot of people never finished with him. He was tough, and like I could never say anything. So a lot of people started with him and just left. They couldn't continue to get a PhD with him. I was one of the few that could. But the thing that I liked about it, the thing that he trained into me, is that I couldn't say anything that I didn't back up. I'd say, well, I think this, it looks like the data is going this way. He's like, why? Why do you think that? And it just would fully confront, like at every second, I had to be prepared to defend my words and defend what I wrote. And that kind of training, like that, has not left me. And my default position is skepticism. Now that can be a drag to be around, right? But when it comes to the engaging with things on social media, I have a default reaction of, I don't believe that, or I filter most of it out. And then when I start honing in on looking at something, I'm constantly challenging it. And it's going to have to start with some education at the early age. And maybe this Finnish model might work, is like, can we get the default to be, I don't trust this? And as much as that is like, doesn't feel like a great way of existing as a human, it may be that's the way we have to exist as humans in the new age of objective reality. We can't trust it because everything is filtered through what could be false content.
I do think that's a really good practice. I think people should definitely, try and adopt that in their own way. Great story, by the way. I do feel like we're too much time has passed. Too much has gone awry. Too many people are lost to the algorithm, lost to misinformation, gullible to misinformation, for a whole list of reasons. And I think the younger people are very aware. That I do believe. And what I see in my personal life is just how skeptical they are. They saw what social media did. They saw, kids that were on the tablet 24/7 and kids that are not on the tablet 24/7, what that does to just your brain, right? What reading a book versus staring at YouTube for hours does to your brain. I think the youth is really, really wise in that regard as a byproduct of the systems we created. But I do think there's just a lot that's lost. And so that begs the question then, like, what can we as a society do? And maybe this is regulations, maybe this is something, we can touch a little bit on the DSA, and like I look at X and Elon Musk and the influence that he had on the US election and now the impact he's trying to have on EU elections. And, there's tons of misinformation on that platform. There's the money side of things as well, but like what type of guardrails can we as a society put in place to kind of protect the information that we have while at the same time holding to the same values like free speech?
So that's such a loaded question, which is great.
You're welcome.
Yeah, thank you. But I'm excited to jump in on it. So kind of going back to, we're trying to normalize audiences, in my opinion. You can basically make whatever claim you want these days. And, news is sensationalized. They're also in the headline game. They're trying to cater towards a biased audience to, say the thing that keeps them here, and, don't get too far off drift. But, anything can be said, and then information can immediately be created to support that claim. It can be found easily on the internet. And then you're able to, kind of like smoke and mirrors your way to false facts. So I do think, and you think, we've been talking a lot about social media, almost more than democracy in this whole conversation. But you think about who was, we're all looking at it from the United States point of view, or I am at least. Who was in the room at Inauguration Day? You had social media giants in the room, and, tech giants in the room. They're there for specific reasons. They have, a desired outcome that they're searching for, and what's beneficial to them. You saw all the changes in the policies, the removal of certain things within social media. And this isn't even just AI, and I'm, fact check me all you want, but I'm pretty sure they got rid of like things like Pride Day or Pride Month and like the Google calendars. Like, they're really trying to do a lot of like, I'm going to use the word cleansing of certain, agendas from what's being displayed or shown or cared about. They get rid of fact checking. So they're really setting up this like tremendous, machine of false information to just get, put into place. And I think that's the real scary part. I would say that, I always question, Shay, I'm probably not on your level, but, I always question, I ask, like, what are they trying to achieve? What's their North Star? Like, what's the goal of what they're trying to do? Like, no one just, especially at that level, politically, no one has just like a carefree thought. They're all strategic. They're part of some sort of party. They're playing favors for somebody else. Like, it's, step on other people's back to get to the top world, in my opinion. But if you get out of line, you're cast to the side. And you saw, beyond just AI, it's like, if you say something that doesn't agree with our party, like, I'm going to go hire you a competitor. I'm going to buy your competition. I'm going to get you out at the next election. And that person also runs social media, who also has gotten rid of a lot of these things. We're just talking about Elon at this point. He's inside of all the government agencies. And, I bump into people. I'm out here in the Richmond area, so there's people that work out of DC. But they've interfaced with Doge. Those conversations are strange. They have to report. Someone who works at the VA that I talked to, they're like, yeah, I have to write an email to Doge once a week about 5 things that I did that week. Like, I can only imagine what's going on there is they're taking some sort of like major collection of like tasks being completed by individuals within government agencies. And they're probably making a tremendous amount of decisions using AI about what those agencies are going to look like in a couple of years based on those inputs from people. It's very similar to how LLMs were initially trained, right? They're collecting information. Social media is collecting information. It's absolutely wild what's going on. And that's where I always ask, like, what are they trying to do with it? Because I do believe that the same sort of mechanisms could be applied for more positive outcomes, right? It's idea collection and the aim and trajectory of where you're trying to take them. But man, oh man, there's a lot, and the fact that social media is inside the government and dictating and eliminating all sorts of controls, like, it's not a regulation that's going to save this. It's just people have to kind of individually, figure this out. And I'm an idea guy, but I don't have too many on how exactly that gets done because of, like you said, Shay, this is it's a nature thing. Like they're preying on the thing that keeps people hooked. Like they don't have to pay for this stuff, so where are they going to go? Like, you know,
Yeah.
it's
I
interesting.
mean, I think there's no way around regulations. I mean, when we recognize things in society that are dangerous, like historically, things that like were, threatened safety, threatened the public good, threatened, we set up laws and regulations, or we set up institutions to enforce some of those norms. I mean, there's no like we're all very animalistic, we're all very instinct driven. The only reason why we've been able to sort of organize ourselves in such a way is because of the institutions and the structures that we've set up in society globally now, right? And so there's these global kind of norms that I'm going to, even though I might want to have the interest of an individual, and in this case we can think about a corporation as an individual, unfortunately, um, their interests don't trump, no pun intended, they don't trump other people's interests. If there's like a lot of people who just don't want to, so we put labels on things that are making people obese. We put literal guardrails up. We put seatbelts up and stuff. So this idea that like we have to strip back, that we're overly infringing on people's fundamental rights by having regulations, or we're inhibiting innovation, I think that we are putting ourselves in a very dangerous situation, because we've never been here in history before. I mean, I guess that's by default true, but we've never, as a society, as a world population, been this big. We've never had climate problems like we've had. We've never had resource constraints like we've had, and we've never had AI or nuclear weapons or any of that. And so we are in just uncharted territory. And so to think that like you want to take off guardrails and that's going to make things safer is, I think, naive. And I think the only reason that people, and we know who the people are advocating for this, is because it's financially advantageous for them. And the social media and democracy issue is important. People have recognized that if you polarize them, it's just easier to control them. It's easier to get what you want. And that's what we have to put in structures in place that prevent that polarization. As much as it might feel like we're inhibiting free speech, we have to get people to recognize as a society that we have more in common with our neighbor than we have differences. And most of the time, we would have no reason to dislike those people or to think like they're the enemy, which is kind of what all of this is driving towards. And I think that we don't have any other mechanism, because of the way we are as animals and the way our psychology works and our chemistry works. We have no other structure or no other mechanism to do that other than institutions and regulations. And that's got us this far. I mean, I see people collecting trash outside here. I know this guy is going to pick up my trash and go, I don't have to worry about that. Why is he doing that? He'd probably rather be doing something else. We have this whole infrastructure that allows our global society to thrive and not kill each other for the most part. And wars are decreasing over time, even though it feels differently. And so I think this is a very dangerous precedent. So that's just my opinion, is like, we can't be afraid of regulations, because regulations are what keeps us from killing each other. Yeah. And it's a very dangerous precedent in this super volatile era to be like pulling those back, because the what could happen is that we just may not exist as a society anymore. Not to be depressing on a Monday morning, but
well, I was going to bring this up, but just there's an article that came out on the 14th, so a few days ago from when we record this, about the Trump administration basically eliminating any mention of the word AI safety, responsible AI fairness, and the NIST, U.S. Artificial Intelligence, Safety Institute. And that is, I would just say, unnecessary. I don't know what the point of that is. Like, why get rid of words that are commonly accepted as things that should be in place? So when I say there's no regulation that's coming, we're much quicker veering in the other direction. And that is also influencing, global policy and global trade. Obviously, there's so much talk of tariff, but you saw what happened, when Vance was speaking abroad a month or so ago, whenever that was, and just like they hammer this, regulation stifles innovation. It's a war with China. It's a war with China. Like, that's the only thing I've heard. I've heard it a year ago. I was in DC listening to senators speak, and it's the only thing that was discussed is it's a war with China. It is a scary space, but I would also argue completely against it. I think the uncertainty of what is accepted or what will get a business in trouble is so, like, it's so bad for business to have no clear direction, right? People also, from like a psychological standpoint, like, people need to know the frame which they can operate within. And I guess if there's no rules within the frame, then it's a lawless world. And I think that's what's trying to be done, because it's consolidation of power and all these other things. When we think about the global political space, like, AI is
libertarian economic systems as well. It's just the idea of take away government, take away barriers, and then free enterprise takes over.
I mean, if that's the case, then
that's the ideological case for think this. But I don't
it's
think
a power grab, man. That's what it feels like. But it feels like they're eliminating all their barriers that are there to protect people from bad actors that can ascend to the top. And I would say that the majority of people, like, I don't know, I'm not going to take this like wildly political from my point of view, but I don't think that economically we're headed in the right place. Like, I think most people would agree with that. A little bit of history and why AI auditing is also really interesting from a topic and what we do. Like, look at what happened in the early, 20th century. Now we're talking 1900s. We had a lot of new technology in healthcare, right? A lot of new technology in healthcare. It was advancing industrial revolution, and there was such an uncertainty about what claims were being made, and there was no like regulation. This is very like corrupt, government time, the Gilded Age, blah blah blah. And, the function of auditors only became a mandated, regulated thing after the Great Depression hit. And it was 4 years after the the run on the markets, Black Friday, whatever. Like, so what I believe is the trigger point to where the tipping point rather, is something bad has to happen for people to actually move in a new direction, and it has to be pretty significant. And my fear is that there's that's a known thing. I'm not the smartest man on the planet, but I think there's a race against when something bad happens, and there's extract as much money out of the markets as possible from a certain side of the coin. But either way, the function of auditors became a necessary function, regulated by the SEC for financial market stability, because there were so many false claims and so much misinformation. And back then, we're not talking about AI. We're just talking about bold-faced liars. Like, straight up snake oil salesmen is the term, because they just would say it was a thing and it absolutely wasn't. And whatever. I think I can see through some untruths. And, I'm concerned about a consumer-driven economy where we have a lot of people, going back to financial concern, who don't have safety nets, who don't have, job security. And what does that take us in a short window? And then what is the new impact? Is it just economic recession, Great Depression, or is it, as you pointed out, Shay, much more conflict-driven? And, look at what happened after 1929, how everything was framed up as an economic challenge, and then you walk into World War II. I mean, my goodness, we're facing some really scary things, but man, it's wild out here.
I have a lot to say.
It took 40 minutes to get there, but we got
there. I don't disagree with you, and I don't think a lot of people would disagree with you about the value of laws. And I'll get to that in a second. But we are also, there's two things at play. First is we're a prisoner of the moment. And statistically, living right now today is better than any time in human history, with the advancements of it's just across the board in terms of like sanitation, medication, access to opportunities, just GDP per person, like without question. But it's hard not to see that when you're working 3 jobs, right? When you're consuming negative content all the time. There's a great quote by a German chancellor, I think in the 90s, and I'm going to butcher this, but he basically was saying that like his generation, he's the last bit of leaders that was going to remember the horrors of World War II. And we're now entering a phase of the world where people don't remember a time where there wasn't peace in North America and in Europe, and that safety, right? Or regulation, to your point on auditing. That people don't remember a time anymore when we didn't have systems in place to hold financial accounting accountable, right? So that's a danger. To the point on the why we're going in different directions, what the causes for all of these deregulations and stuff. I actually think it's less nefarious than the average person thinks. I think we've just become so politicized, and again, it's partly because of AI and its impact on social media and like information and all this curated stuff. I think it's just, I've said this my entire life, politics is a swinging pendulum, and right now it's just swinging so far, right? To both sides. And the first acts that Donald Trump did when he took into office, it wasn't like I'm nefariously going to do all of these things. Even if he is intended to do that, that wasn't the goal. The first thing was everything Joe Biden did, I'm going to get rid of. And that is just a reaction. And I think that's what's happening everywhere. And as the US is going away from regulation, you look at the EU, they're doing the opposite, right? And I think what's happening is there's consolidations politically and ideologically, and everything is more or less just a reaction to what somebody else that I don't agree with or I don't align with politically or whatever it is. I think there's just consolidations of thought and reactions more than nefarious. Because in business, and Brian, you know this, in business especially, businesses they follow trends, right? It's like, I'm going to do this because my competitor is doing this, not because it's necessarily best for my business. It's just a reaction.
Well, that's you're getting into wilder thoughts.
I feel like I've had so many just random tangents.
This is an off the rails combo. I love it. So, I mean, capitalism is the last great arena to compete in, right? In my opinion. So, to your point, I think
Fortnite.
The best ideas that I've been able to come up with is, customers and consumers are not happy by and large, like we just talked about it. So if all the things we're talking about aren't breeding a very positive world that people are, living in the moment or potentially raising their kids and their families.
But I would be devil's advocate and ask, is that actually true, or is it just something we're perceiving? And this is that 1950s idea, right? It's like, we need to go back to the 50s where everything was a dream. Was it actually true? Was it true for you, just like it is for somebody that looks very different than you? Or do we just perceive it that way?
Well, I roll on vibes probably too often, but I do feel like I connect with people. No, I just think, there are better outcomes that can be achieved with AI. Sure. And, I think I say capitalism is the last great arena because, everything is about money at the end of the day. So, how can you make more money with AI? Like it's such a powerful technology. You can draw audiences by just producing more value. Value isn't just like how much money you keep in your pocket at the end of the day. Shay, the concerns you brought up about climate change and all these other bigger problems, right? These are things that most people, I believe, would love to see people trying to solve. How can AI do that? Can it bring people to a new place? That's kind of like this eternal optimism that I'm trying to channel and keep and bring to as many people as I can when I just have direct conversations. But like, we should be competing a lot harder in the business arena with AI to achieve new outcomes. And I think AI is really challenging what is a sustainable business model these days. So, cue that up for another pod. But we're running long here, and Going
Yeah,
around
we're getting
philosophy.
Yeah, we're getting a time.
yeah,
Shay, before you round it out, can I just ask the audience, was this actually talked about democracy, or did we just go in some rants?
yeah. I'm sure we'll get some comments.
It's a good
Yeah,
chat,
I
though.
mean, I think we should revisit this, but I think it is. I mean, it's germane to, AI is really important in this whole area. Like it's gonna be a force to either equalize or divide, bring people together or divide. And so, yeah, we're gonna probably have to talk about this again, I think. So if you are listening to this on a podcast, thank you so much for listening. If you're watching us on YouTube, a like and subscribe would really help us out. Comment below if you want to hear us talk about certain things. And we'll catch you next time on Lunchtime Babbling.